The paper that Katie and myself are going to present is based on an ongoing research that started a couple of years ago, and it involves like a work of consultancy with the municipalities involved, but also work of research. So that is going to be one of the key points of our presentation, like methodologically wise. So our presentation critically discusses the pilot project initiated by the Estonian state to scale down the infrastructures and real estate of Kohtla-Järve, a town developed in relation to intensive mining and industrial activity. The pilot project assumes that the sacrifice of half-empty apartment buildings may positively transform the urban built environment and increase the value of what is left standing, thus changing the dwellers' everyday lives and how the town is perceived. The paradoxical idea is that we can accomplish socio-material stability and revalue local real estate by demolishing a part of the existing housing stock. Demolition thus is presented as a way of putting things in place anew, allowing local infrastructures to continue working, even if in a smaller size. Planning and financial efforts thus are no longer oriented towards expanding the town or the infrastructures, but rather to reach socio-material stability in a context of negative capability. Demolition can therefore be considered as an activity that creates order and makes governance tangible and visible to residents. We also investigate the epistemic dimensions of the half-empty phenomenon and how it affects the perception of this town and of the region overall, as well as how the demolition plans are received by the local population. We argue for endurance as a framework to approach decline and shrinkage, being a better concept than resilience to understand the decisions and concrete practices of urban actors in handling the complicated circumstances. In comparison to the prevalent discussions on urban regeneration, the concept of endurance has more potential for anthropological understanding by indexing a situation of negative capability and addressing aversively degraded locations that beckon material intervention. Our key contribution pertains thus to the changing rationality of urban governance, where demolishing is thought to lead to growth, putting emphasis on endurance rather than decay, and the fact that demolishing is also about the restoration of order. We thus problematize demolition strategies as ways to deal with shrinking cities and put the focus on the heuristic value of endurance in urban planning, exploring both its potential for further theorization as much as the empirical value of this concept. Further on, if resilience is invoked as an immediate response to crisis, valorizing adaptability, endurance captures social dynamics better than resilience, like reflecting closer to local agency and ecology of knowledge. Moreover, while the term resilience reflects the ability to maintain an equilibrium in a situation of financial and ontological security, endurance suggests an act of persevering and attenuating, hence the ability to withstand hardship and maintain things in a context in which normal functioning goes away. Along with a spatial stigma and increasing regional disparities, Eastern Estonia faces a scenario of partial loss of key social services, such as school, businesses, or medical support. In this sense, and as one of the locals stated to us during one of the meetings, I quote, "Every person in this region is an asset. Whoever the person is, they all are important."
Hello from my side, and I continue here. So during these past 2 years, in cooperation with 3 municipal governments, the Estonian Ministry of Finance is carrying out the experiment in which emptying, partly privately owned apartment buildings will be demolished. The aim of the pilot project is to test solutions to the problem of emptying real estate and eventually to the local sense of decline. Accordingly, it is generating a policy model and a guidance material to be later implemented in other municipalities, including legal applications, funding allocation, and participatory steps to relocate inhabitants. The success or failure of this experiment will affect then other municipalities all over Estonia, thus transforming this region, Ida-Virumaa, into a testing ground for prototyping new urban governance in real-life settings. Eastern Estonia, therefore, is approached by the state as a lab whereby actions are rehearsed and from which new policy models will emanate. This research is based on participant observation and consultation in the design and application of the pilot project, for which we have attended various policy meetings with the state institution as well as with local stakeholders. As part of the consultation work, around 50 of interviews with local politicians and residents were conducted over a year and a half, while we also have visited many apartments where the neighbors are supposed to move in. Our study specifically focuses on the municipality of Kohtla-Järve. Here, an open bed extraction of oil shale started in 1990s. Sorry, this is wrong. Francisco. Can you open the last one in Google?
Sorry, I don't have the last one, but let's...
Okay, yes. When thousands of miners moved into the area and a railway station and processing factories were built, during the Soviet regime, the industrial activity increased and the municipality greatly expanded. And as you can see from here, from the correct slide, the territory of the municipality is still divided into 5 discontinuous districts that composing a kind of an archipelago based on the former land use of mining. The average price of an apartment in our subject of study, which is a Kohtla-Järve, costs 110 euros, compared to Tallinn, the capital of Tallinn, where the price is 1,500 euros. In Estonia, mining, quarrying and energy production processes are concentrated in eastern part. The territory is affected by the intensive mining and extractive activity aiming at oil shale extraction by both the Soviet modernization as its aftermath of privatization. A substantial part of the Soviet industries remain working and are not external to the global capitalism and market economy, but asymmetrically integrated in it. The size, now I go more directly to Kohtla-Järve. The size of elderly population is one of the triggers of this emptying process. In apartment buildings, people in their late age have narrow means and less motivations to maintain the outdated building stock. One of the drivers behind such an abandonment of apartment building is the increasing cost of utilities. The second reason behind the half-empty phenomena is a resignation of individual properties to the municipality. There are many cases of elderly people who don't have descendants, or if they do, they are generally disinterested in their low-valued apartments, hence relatives choose to reject the inherited properties. In the pilot project, officials were testing how to revert the situation of negative capability by matching inhabitants' property on a value basis, or in turn, rehousing them in one of the municipally owned apartments. The key turning point, and that was before the pilot project was initiated in 2017, was when Kohtla-Järve municipality decided not to accept any more apartments donated to them, impelling locals to give the properties to the state instead. In doing so, the municipality transferred the vacant real estate issue to the Ministry of Finance, impelling state institutions to taking action in this matter. The officials explained that the size of the problem was bigger than their means and thus tried to engage the Estonian state in resolving it. As a local official pointed out, the municipal authorities saw the emptying of apartment buildings as a state problem. Therefore, ownership and Also, the responsibilities to solving the problem had to be transferred to them. And here is a quote from the mayor of Kohtla-Järve of this issue as well, which is kind of saying the same. And once the Ministry of Finances got involved, demolition and resettlement strategies were proposed to reorder and re-rationalize local urban planning. However, the municipality of Kohtla-Järve was, and is still, reluctant to use the term shrinking. And in the meetings, they insisted that we are not shrinking, we just need to take down a couple of buildings to improve the quality of urban environment. Likewise, they often diminish the political charge of the comprehensive planning.
I stopped sharing, Katie, so perhaps you go back to the right slides in the meantime.
Okay, continue.
So from the beginning of the pilot project, it was clear that the demolition of apartment houses and the scaling down strategy will require significant public investment. However, one of the challenges is that these measures had to be funded in a regional context of declining tax revenues, and whereby the need for social services has been growing significantly. Moreover, municipal authorities complained that the revenues of industrial activity do not return to local areas, but go to Tallinn. To support this pilot project, the Ministry of Finances made use of the Stabilization Reserve Fund created by the state after privatizing assets in the 90s. During the meetings with municipal and state experts, a list of worrying numbers and forecasts were often put on the table. For instance, arguing that more than 5,000 apartment buildings may fall out of use in Estonia in the next 20 years. These negative estimates, demographical data, and also financial statistics are serious, no doubt, yet the constant repetition of them somehow acquire a performative character, making it difficult to question the demolition strategy. In the expert group meetings that we attended, future, I quote, was among the most repeated themes, as well as potential, scenarios, visions, and resilience. But growth was never questioned, and the idea of sustainability plan was either put forward as such. In other words, experts were talking of scaling down and liquidating buildings, but the municipality still referred to growth as a natural result to the pilot project. The liquidation of buildings assumed a normative character and entered the vocabulary of local officials, turning the pilot project into a process of learning. Likewise, by providing the municipalities with funding and savoir-faire, state experts also predict that local stakeholders will take a more proactive role and responsibility in dealing with the emptying problem. Overall, the shrinkage of towns has become a wider phenomenon in former socialist countries, which led to a decline in living conditions to those who stayed. Interestingly, many post-socialist towns became part of planetary urbanization after '91, yet integrated in a way that led to disinvestment and outmigration, thus with the threat of losing its urbanity. Different authors have shown that urban shrinkage is a problem that operates at different spatial levels, from regional to global, and is associated with wider social, economic, and cultural transformations. For instance, Matthias Bern has noted that coping with decline in Eastern Germany has become a more important issue than entrepreneurial growth strategies. Also, Felix Ringel and Dace Zenowska have approached this issue yet through the lens of endurance. They have studied social sustainability and forms of maintaining the future in Hoyerswerda and in the Latvian countryside, respectively. In these two cases, it is residents who insist on maintaining buildings to avoid the expected infrastructural endings, practicing a bottom-up modality of endurance, somehow related to Slavka's paper. In the case of Kohtla-Järve, however, it is the demolition rather than the maintenance that entails a general promise of endurance in the future. As a result, we can say that endurance can be the object of two rather different forms of urban planning. As a top-down policy based on demolition of the existing infrastructure, preparing for a radically different and distant future, and as a bottom-up intervention by residents willing to hold on the ongoing forms of life as a matter of maintaining life, basically.
And part of our methodological challenge was not only to account for the observable realities, but also what appeared as maybe somewhat unfinished and practicing less conclusive ways of knowledge production. And even if most of our conversations with different stakeholders were held in Estonian, regional and state experts all seem to be kind of trying to figure out like what each of them meant by words as shrinkage itself, or what is the future, what actually means scaling down. Not simply due to the different agendas involved in the meetings, but also because of the need to learn how to cooperate, establish a common ground of mutual understanding, and to overcome this kind of feeling of suspicion. Moreover, the prototyping character of the project and the cooperation with both experts and the inhabitants influenced data collection, as well as our institutional agreements and accessible knowledge. All actors involved were working with the sense of testing, the very process of working itself, rehearsing ways of approaching to the emptying problem. Yet the horizontality of relations experienced in the pilot project was also negatively noted by some participants because of they were creating confusions about, about correspondence or different roles and responsibilities. For instance, I was approached by a municipal stakeholder, and he was saying that, I don't want to have many bosses, I just want to have one. Nevertheless, the testing condition was not that unknown to the municipal authorities, since they have been functional with limited knowledge and resources for decades. They have been also working with very limited financial resources and with the incomplete information, while having to adapt to the new forms of neoliberal governmentality and the distribution of resources. We also noted how conflicting information was circulating around the pilot project, which enhanced fear and insecurity among the local populations. Rumors full of kind of reports of the spread full of these ideas, like you can see in the slides, were spread among the residents. As a part of our consultation work, series of interviews with inhabitants living in these listed apartment buildings were also carried out. So there were altogether, I think, around 30 interviews with 2 listed apartment buildings. And the interviewees reflected very little faith to the real impact of the pilot project. And some of the informants, after they found out that, we got the phone numbers from the municipality or from the housing head, they wanted to end the conversation immediately. An important question to understanding the risk and the politics involved in the pilot project, therefore, is to whom the experiment is carried out. While being part of the process, we have found out that the inhabitants in Kohtla-Järve are not used to being heard or taking part in the political decisions. As one of the interviewees argued, if it has already been decided, it will happen anyhow, notwithstanding what we say. For local residents, institutions are located, and not only mentally, but also physically, very far away places, such as in the capital of Tallinn, and their own town continues to deteriorate and empty. As noted by Zenovska, emptiness is a lasting state of affairs with its own internal dynamics. In both cases, Eastern Estonia and the countryside of Latvia, we can find a common sentiment of loss, and that does not appear as an opposite of fullness, but of future.
So now we are moving towards the end, and we are referring to an event that we attended. So in October 2020, a public meeting was organized by the municipality to inform the tenants of 2 apartment houses listed for demolition about the different options that the relocating strategy offers. A white tent was arranged in the courtyard of 2 of these buildings, and pies and tea were offered. Around 20 residents showed up, and there we could see a choreography of suspicion in which neighbors will walk around the tent first, then observe what is going on and who is inside, and finally stand at the entrance of the gate for a few minutes and deciding if stepping inside or going away. The representative of the municipality played the leading role in the meeting in Russian language and patiently and professionally explaining the details of the pilot project and the possible options for relocation. I quote him, "We are going to relocate, we are going to liquidate buildings that have already been amortized," he announced, before referring to the independent experts in Tallinn that were advising for this project. Tensions emerged regarding the extent to which the experiments should proceed. A few neighbors also expressed disagreement over the compensation. For instance, another neighbor yelled, I quote, "I don't want to be part of this social laboratory." The discussion then moved outside the tent. There, different versions of what the value of a building is were expressed. Then someone said, I quote, "If you don't want that Järve ends up as Bibikona, which is a ghost town nearby, then we have to do something." Tensions there got heated, as you can see in this quote, but as we are a bit over time, I am ending the description of the event. At some point, the representative of the Ministry of Finances replied, I quote, "The plan is well-intentioned and in the interest of the state." And before ending the sentence, another neighbor replied, I quote, "And why not in our interest?" The demolition of apartment houses became part of state legibility for residents. After the meeting and considering the opposition of residents, the municipality, together with the representative of the ministry, decided to list only one of the 2 buildings under discussion for demolition. So as part of being an experiment, the pilot project finally included the residents' feedback.
Mm-hmm. And now I wrap up. In Kohtla-Järve, endurance is being materialized through an intricate mixture of stability and change, restoring the sense of order, and for future be rescaling down the existing housing infrastructure. The demolition of housing infrastructure materializes the aspiration of a better future and makes governance tangible in an area affected by demographic decrease and post-socialist abandonment. The problem, however, is that the demolition strategy has been designed as just a functional intervention that seeks to preserve the urbanity of the town in a context of negative capability. As we discussed, the prevailing discourse of growth and resilience were never questioned, and the political charge of the intervention was constantly discharged, being instead referred as ad hoc. Thank you.